Hello everybody, welcome back to my book channel. As you saw in the title, this week's video is my June wrap up and July TBR. Now, last month I think I filmed my April-May reading wrap up. I combined those months and talked about my current reads. Let me know which one you guys like better. If you'd rather I do 2 months all together or just talk about like the current month and the books I want to read next. But enough of that long-winded intro. Let's just talk about the books. So I do, in classic Olivia style, have a post-it ready to go with all of the books that I read in June and the books that I want to read in July. So the first book that I read in June is not going to come at a huge surprise because I did do a whole reading vlog about it. And that book is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in the ACOTAR series, and I freaking loved this book. So I can't get into what this book is about too deeply just because it will spoil the first one. But basically, the first book is called A Court of Thorns and Roses, and it's about this girl named Feyre who is doing everything that she can to provide for her family in the dead of winter. They're super poor, and she goes out into the forest and kills a wolf. But spoiler, it's not a wolf. It is a magical fae creature, and she ends up getting wrapped up in this whole like fae world, and it's a wonderful fantasy romance series. So this book I am rating 6 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it, but I'm not going to get too into it. So if you want to watch my spoiler-filled reading vlog, I'll link it on the screen and in the description box down below. Maybe I'll put the books that I read over here so you can kind of see that. Okay, so the next book that I read in June was The Selection. Now, this book was a reread for me. I loved The Selection when I was in middle school. This series was like my entire life. I wanted to be America Singer so badly. But for anyone who isn't familiar with this series, it's basically about a girl named America Singer, and she grows up in this dystopian world where the whole kingdom that she lives in is broken up into castes. And those castes are numbered 1 through 8. And the lower your number, basically, the lower your status, your wealth is. And so she's a 5. She's kind of sitting there in the middle. And in this kingdom, when it comes time for the prince to marry, they host this big old thing called the selection, where they randomly choose 35 girls from the kingdom to come and compete for the prince's hand. And of course, America Singer gets chosen, and our badass girl goes to the castle and competes unwillingly for the prince's hand. It's really good. It's 3 books, and yeah, it's just such a fun little experience. I rated this 5 stars. Okay, the next book that I read, I actually listened to on my library app called Libby, and I listened to Homo Deus by Noah Yuval Harari, and that is a nonfiction book about I think on the cover it says like the history. Oh man, it's like about the future of Homo sapiens, if that makes sense. So for anyone who doesn't know me already, hello. I do have another channel actually on YouTube where I talk about anthropology. It's kind of like my main thing. So I do love humans and the history and the future of our species. And so that book takes a really deep dive into some of the questions that humanity is kind of facing right now as we look to the future. A few key points that I took away from it that I really enjoyed, and I'll put in this reading wrap up so maybe you could think about if it's the kind of book that you would want to read. It opens with this discussion of death, right? And how over the last like several 100 years, we've kind of lengthened the human lifespan, and it asks questions like, are we going to continue to make decisions that push the length of life of Homo sapiens. I thought that was really interesting. Something else that I also thought was interesting was that this book was written in 2016, and now it being 2023, certain things have either come to pass or not. And going at it with that lens also was really interesting. But if you're not a huge nonfiction person, maybe not the book for you, but if you're interested in either human history or some things that humans might be facing in the coming years, I would highly recommend giving it a look because, yeah, it was awesome. And I also don't usually give nonfiction books ratings, but I will say that I enjoyed it. So the next book that I read in June I checked it out from my library, so I don't actually have it anymore because I did return it. Oh no, there's a car honking out there. And that book was A Man's Search for Meaning by Victor, I'll put it on the screen. And this book is another nonfiction book. It was recommended to me by my boyfriend. He read it at, I think, the beginning of this year. And it's one that I'd been wanting to get to. And for anyone who's not familiar with this book, first of all, highly recommend that you read it. People say that this is the kind of book that everyone should read before they die. And I completely agree. A Man's Search for Meaning is written by a Holocaust survivor, and he basically was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I'm not quite sure, and he, throughout the story, the author writes about his experiences in Auschwitz, in these like Holocaust camps. And it's basically like his take on how the people there were coping with these horrendous situations. I'm so sorry about these cars honking outside. I think it's really important to learn about our human history, the good and the bad parts. So reading something about the Holocaust and the author's personal experiences, going through the Holocaust and his take on how people were coping, I found it really interesting. It's very difficult to read, so if you do decide to pick that up, keep that in mind. And I also just really liked exploring this idea that, humanity is so strong and we're able to cope with so many things. And yeah, I don't want to go into it too much because I want you to take away your own meaning, and everybody walks away learning something different from that book. Again, I didn't rate it, but I will say that I thought it was wonderful. So yeah, A Man's Search for Meaning, you should absolutely read it. Okay, not going to talk about this one too long. The next book that I read in June was The Elite by Kiera Cass. This is the second book in the Selection series. Again, this was a reread. Basically, it continues where this book left off. There's less girls in the palace. During this reread, though, I gave the Selection 5 stars. I gave The Elite 3 stars, actually, but not at the fault of the author necessarily or the book. I just cannot stand love triangle tropes, and that is in this whole series. Once I know who I cannot take it. I just want the other person out of the picture. So it was just certain parts were kind of hard for me to read. So yeah. Okay, and then I'm actually currently reading, today is the 29th of June, and I'm currently reading The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, and I'm reading that on my Kindle. I have about 20% left, so I hopefully will finish it by the end of this month. If not, I'm just going to put it in my July wrap up, but I will say it is so good. I don't read thrillers super often just because I'm easily spooked, and that's putting it lightly. But this book is so, so good, and it's on Kindle Unlimited. So yeah. Okay, now we're gonna go into July TBR. What do I want to read next month? I have my big old stack right here. And this is definitely, please don't hold me to this, everybody. Sometimes I'm really good at sticking to a list, and other times it just goes completely out the window. I will say I am going on a trip next month, so I anticipate doing some reading on my Kindle, and none of these books are on my Kindle, so just bear with me. This is what I want to read. Will it happen? I don't know. Okay, the first book on my July TBR was a recommendation from one of you guys. And I talked about this in my book haul. I found this in a little free library in my neighborhood. And that book is Anxious People by Friedrich Bachmann. This has been in my mind. Like, I've been wanting to read this for a while, but I didn't have a physical copy until recently. And my understanding is that it's like a really quirky story about a crime that either almost happened or didn't happen. And basically, there's this failed bank robber who comes into this real estate something rather and then takes a bunch of people captive. And I think throughout the story, we like get to know each of these captives and then the criminal themselves or something like that. I will say the one of you that recommended to read this said to go into it pretty blind, so apologies if that was a terrible explanation, but I am going to respect your suggestion and go into this blind. So, Anxious People by Friedrich Bachmann. Okay, this next book has been going around a little bit lately, and the next book that I want to read in July is called Trust. And this was, I think it either won the Pulitzer Prize or it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. I'm not quite sure. But this book was actually loaned to me by my boyfriend's mom. We were listening to the audiobook in like the car on a long drive to go somewhere, and I really want to finish it. Right now, from the audiobook, I'm about oh no, sorry, I tapped the microphone. Right now, I'm about 61 pages in from where we got to in the audiobook, but I would like to finish this in July if I can. But this book is basically about this couple. Their names are Benjamin and Helen Rask. And it takes place, it starts like in the later 1800s, but it goes through the 1920s and how this couple together was extremely, extremely wealthy. They've done really well and invested really well, most notably the husband. And there is the crash that happens in the economy and what happens to them when they lose their money. And I think it also calls into question like how they actually got all their money, if I'm not mistaken. And I think there's also like kind of a mystery element that goes through this. So from the 60 pages that I got from the audiobook, I did really enjoy it. And I do feel like the hardest part is over because I'm kind of in the story now. So maybe I'll pick this up next actually once I finish The Housemaid. I don't know. The next book I have to put on this list, and I don't know if I'll get to it, but I want to. I really do. I want to get to it because I'm so bad at finishing series. But the next book on my July TBR is A Court of Wings and Ruin. We're not going to spend time talking about this because, again, it will spoil the entire series. But this is the next book in the ACOTAR series. It comes after the one that I finished last month. And this is the one where there's like a war going on, is my understanding. So there's a lot of like political intrigue in here. And also our main character, Feyre, is positioned very differently than she was in the first two books. No spoilers here. But I am really, really looking forward to this. But part of me is worried that this is going to take me the entire month of July to read because I think it's literally like it's 703 or 699 pages. This is a chunky boy, so wish me luck on this, girl. Okay, the next book on my July TBR, I'm actually currently listening to, so I should get to it because I haven't finished it yet and I'm really enjoying it. And that book is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I was told that out of all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, Daisy Jones and the Six in particular is really, really incredible on audiobook. And it's basically about this band from the 70s. And it goes through the story of how this band got together, but it's written in like this interview style. So each of the characters way in the future are talking about their experience meeting each other, joining the band, the music, and For context, I've read Malibu Rising and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and gave those 5 stars. And somehow I think Daisy Jones and the Six is my favorite so far. I'm loving it. I'm only about halfway through, so I do intend to finish that in July. So yeah, Daisy Jones and the Six is on the July TBR, and I should finish it in July. Now, this last book I wasn't sure if I should put on here, but I think I'm going to, just because usually I read like 3 to 4 books a month. This month I had a really good month. Hopefully July will be a really good month too. But the last book, I just had to put it on here because I've been wanting to read this for so long. And that is The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is about like a grumpy old man who works for the Department of Magical Youth. And basically his job is to manage magical children. And at the beginning of this story, he gets sent to this island where these magical children are potentially too dangerous, I think. And he has to like decide what to do about that. So I found this at a thrift store and I was through the roof because it's in pristine condition and I've been dying to read this. So hopefully I can get to this. I just feel like I have some obligations. Like I'm in the middle of this series. I'm partway through this book because of the audiobook that I started. Oh no. Okay, they all survived. And then one of you guys specifically recommended the Friedrich Bachmann book, so I don't know where this fits into everything, but I do want to read this as well. Okay, so that was my June wrap up and July TBR. These are all the books, including or not including the ones that I either listened to or checked out from the library. Let me know what you guys are hoping to read in July. I know a lot of people are doing like summer TBR, summer book recs. Let me know if you want a video like that. My sister actually posted a video on her like summer TBR and summer like book recommendations. None of these are very summery books. They happen to be the books that I want to read right now. So apologies if they're not hitting the like checking off that summer box. But yeah, I've been talking for a while now, so I'm just gonna end this video, edit it. Thank you so much for being here. I'm having such a blast with this extra channel. I'm having so much fun, and I'm loving talking to you guys about books. So I will see you all when I see you, and yeah, I hope you're having a great day and a great reading month. Okay, bye you guys.